This one. It's been a while since I was this excited for a watch release, and this release hit the spot. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any reviews, head-to-head or quick time. And follow me on Instagram and come along with me on my watch collecting journey. This is the first Seiko 5 GMT ever released. This is also among the cheapest, trustworthy GMT movement you can find at this price point. Other options are either quartz, which is fine, or cheap Chinese movement, which is not confidence inspiring. But add about $200 more, and you can get a Steinhardt homage of the Rolex Explorer if that is your taste. However you slice it, we can't deny that Seiko did an excellent job with this one. They came out with a home run of a watch with the GMT functionality in the iconic case, all of this at a very accessible price point and on a much improved Jubilee bracelet. What more can we watch nerds ask for? Let's take a deeper look into this home run. If you own an SKX or one of the Seiko 5 Sports first generation, then you already know what you're getting here. Even if you own a slightly higher end Turtle, Mini Turtle, or even the first generation MM200, the finishing isn't much of a higher quality. The top of the watch has a shallow radial brushing that flat out to a polished chamfered edge. The crown side of the watch see this chamfer edge molding into an integrated crown guard at 4 o'clock. We'll come back to this crown guard as we get further into the review. For now, let's move on to the case side. The case side is curvaceous and receives a nice polishing for the price. The curves here tone down the aggressive nature of a dive watch and makes this watch much more pleasing to the eye. At the same time, it also manages to stand apart from all the other run-of-the-mill dive watch in the market that either looks like each other or the Rolex Submariner. It is a breath of fresh air, and that is high praise for a watch design that is decades old. Flipping the watch over, we are greeted with a display case back. The first thing that struck me is how close the rotor is to the window. This is not usually the case for Seiko watches. The movement also seems to really fill up the case really nicely. This gives it a much higher end feel than what the price point might suggest. There is volume in this case. This suggests that the new movement inside the watch is much thicker and chunkier than the normal 4R movement. The crystal on this watch is Heartlex. The edge of the crystal is interesting. It is chamfered, creating a mirror-like effect at the edge of the dial. I like this effect as it gives this watch a visual interest you don't find in this price range. At the date position, this watch receives a date magnifier, which I don't mind because it does magnify the date by about 0.75 times by my visual estimation. Onto the crown and crown guard. This crown guard makes it very difficult to pop the crown and to operate the crown. The crown guard itself makes it difficult to get a good hold of the crown, and turning the crown itself makes the crown guard scrape your finger. This all sounds like a first world problem, doesn't it? Putting that aside, using the crown itself has some problem. The first position winds the watch, the second position allows you to set the GMT hand when you turn the crown up, and set the date when you turn the crown down. Turning the GMT hand doesn't move the date. The third position hacks the movement and moves all the hands in sync. The problem I find with this sample is that after turning the crown for about 1.5 to 2 turns, it gets unusually heavy. Once you pass that heaviness though, it returns to being smooth. This is a weird sensation and I hope it's just this sample. Moving on to the dial, this is a beautiful dial with a good mix of 5 colors. Yes, there's 5 colors on this dial. First off, let's start with the base. The dial itself is an orange color of course, with sunburst effect. The markers are done in white with silver surrounds that are mirror polished and looks black at times. The hour and minute hands are gilt, and the GMT hand itself is a glossy black. With 5 colors on the dial, one would think that this would be a mess, but it is not. The whole vibe of this watch is very warm and inviting, yet attention grabbing. On the red hot, Seiko has decided to print the 24-hour scale in even increments, mixing it with the second hash marks. This makes it very difficult to know when the GMT hand is pointing at the 9 or 11 o'clock if the bezel is knocked out of place. And knocked out of place it will be. I'll get to that when we get to the bezel section. The marker and the furniture on the dial looks applied. That is true for the Seiko logo, but as always, at this price point on a Seiko watch, the markers are pressed. But Seiko did a good job here to make them look applied. The handset, apart from the GMT hand, is what we usually see from a lower end prospect diver, which is to say we are familiar with them. The addition of the GMT hand is not something we have seen on a Seiko 5 before. It is an arrow-style GMT hand with long pointy tips that reaches out to the red hot. As for the printing on the dial, we see the Seiko 5 emblem printed under the Seiko logo, with the word automatic and GMT above the 6 o'clock marker. The date disc seems to be taken right out of the traditional 4-hour movement. Moving on to the dimension of this watch. This watch has a diameter of 42.5mm, a lug-to-lug of 46mm, a thickness of 13.6mm, lug width of 22mm. The movement in this watch is the new 4R34 movement with a beat rate of 21,600 vibrations per hour and a 41-hour power reserve and 24 joules to make sure that this watch is long-lasting. Like I mentioned earlier, the movement seems bigger than the usual 4R movement and fill in the case a lot more. Onto the bezel. This is an interesting bezel visually. The insert is covered by a hardlex crystal and the bottom half seems to receive a special treatment that, when in direct light, changes color from black to dark gray, signifying daytime on the GMT scale. The markers on the bezel is done in gilt to match the handset on the dial. Sadly, the bezel is not a clicky one. It is a friction-fitted one that turns both ways. It's great that it turns both ways, but it is also easy to accidentally turn, and that makes reading the odd hour times much more difficult than it needs to be. The bracelet is nice. It is a Jubilee style bracelet with solid links and end links, which is a surprise to be honest. The clasp and the buckle is stamped however, and there is plenty of micro adjustment on the clasp. The links are held with split pins, which is not the highest of quality that I've seen from Seiko. If you are resizing this yourself, I will recommend that when you put it back together, put the pin from the reverse side, because it's a pain to try and get it in from the normal side, and I've tried it and f***ed up quite a few pins. On the wrist, this watch is very easy to wear. With the short lug-to-lug distance, it sits beautifully on the wrist and the thickness doesn't bother me at all. With the Jubilee bracelet, it looks a bit flashy. If you do mind that though, I would suggest putting it on a black Tropic strap, which gives this watch a fresh new look that is actually very vintage. Overall, this is a great watch with a new and exciting movement, and this watch feels more like an advertisement for the new movement, and Seiko is trying to attract business buyers for it. I'm not sure how long until Seiko put this movement in another watch, but I'm goddamn sure we'll see a lot of micro brands coming out with interesting designs to fill that shoe. Stay tuned for my next video and don't forget to like, subscribe and share this review with your friends. Follow me on Instagram and see you next time. Peace.